Now, there's also been change over in the U.S. Donald Trump will be returning to the White House after winning the presidential elections this week. During the last Trump administration, Africa did not feature prominently. In fact, U.S.-Africa policy was largely driven by Washington's desire to counter the influence of China and Russia. Otherwise, the Trump government maintained security cooperation and attempted to turn the relationship mostly towards trade. Let's get the thoughts of Teniola Tayo, policy advisor, joining us from Durham, North Carolina. Good to have you on the program, Teniola. Now, Africa didn't feature significantly during Trump's last term. And to be fair, it hasn't been prominent either under Biden. So should we expect more of the same going forward, policy-wise?
I think it really depends. I mean, Trump's rhetoric has been very clear. It's about making America great again. And then the question is, to what extent does that align with African interests? So, of course, making America great again has related to America's trade policy, some industrial policy issues. And I think that somewhere along the line, Africa is going to be caught up in that, particularly because of some of the trade relations with China. And, of course, there's the existing trade agreements between African countries or some African countries and the U.S., in personally AGOA.
One key issue, that of AGOA, is that it expires next year. So what do you think we should expect in that regard?
Well, I mean, it's a question that everyone is asking now. What can we expect from a Trump administration as far as AGOA is concerned? I mean, when he was president the last time, he was not against AGOA. He was somewhat supportive of it. But then, in line with some of the recent developments as far as trade policy globally goes, there was a bit of a securitization of the trade access that AGOA provided. And I know that some countries, for example, like South Africa, that benefit very significantly from AGOA are maybe a bit concerned because then AGOA is tied to some other, say, foreign policy objectives, for example, affiliations with countries like Russia or China that are seen to be closer to U.S. interests. For some other African countries, they do not use AGOA as much, so perhaps they're not as concerned. But I say that South Africa definitely has their eyes on what is going to happen with AGOA.
How should African countries be positioning themselves at this point?
One thing that we seem certain of is that the trade wars between the US and China may not be going anywhere anytime soon. So there's a question of how to diversify supply for some of the value chains African countries are looking to participate in and maybe export products to the US, and what that really looks like. So can you start to increase local manufacturing of some products so that you're not as vulnerable to some of the tariffs that may be put in place, targeting China, and so that they don't affect African products. But also when it comes to foreign policy, recognizing that the world is changing. I mean, some people call it a more fragmented world. Some people call it multipolarity, but then just understanding what that means. But also there's the issue of the diaspora and even immigration. So, I mean, Trump coming into office is consistent with some of the other things we've seen globally, which we've seen a lot of politicians write on this very anti-migrant or anti-immigration rhetoric. So for African countries to understand what that means for them, particularly their diaspora, for people in Africa that are looking to travel to study or to work, and then, preparing ahead for some of these inevitable realities. And yeah, I'd say that these are some of the things to keep our eyes on.
Just based on this conversation we've had, it seems to have focused predominantly on trade, but we do know that in the past there was, security cooperation, we had development aid, we even had just, things to do with, like, for example, governance and human rights. Are we saying that those will pretty much take a back seat and it will be mostly business?
The Trump administration generally, of course, has been very clear about being very domestically focused. It's about America. It's about restoring America's position in the world. It's about making sure that America's partners are paying their fair share. And it's really about making America, as he says, great again. So domestic issues within African countries may not be as much of a priority unless they are indirectly related to some other trade policy, foreign policy objectives.
Okay. Teniola Tayo, we appreciate your insights. Thank you for speaking to us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.